What is up, everyone? This is Barnes in the Belfry, and today I want to do a youth group classic. We all know it, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And let me tell you, this was one of my favorite verses growing up, mostly because just that idea of the fact that, life is hard. I had middle school, I had high school, I had college, I got married. Life is hard. And just this thought of, I can get through because Jesus is with me. I mean, that's profound, and it's simple, and it's important, and I don't want to take anything away from that. I knew instinctively that when Paul said, I can do all things, he didn't mean floating off to the moon, teleporting, reading people's minds, breathing underwater. He wasn't talking about, I can be a superhero through Christ. He was saying, I can get through things through Christ. I love the way the NIV translates this verse. Let's back up to verse 11, the second half of verse 11. It says, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. So clearly, Paul is not thinking, I can be a superhero because Jesus is with me, right? I have the creator of the universe within me, so I'm going to go create my own universe. There's this idea that Paul's saying, I can live content because Christ is all I need. However, think about some of the things that Paul experienced. If you've read the book of Acts, you know that Paul healed all kinds of people. You know that Paul cast demons out of people. You know that Paul preached so long one night, a little boy rolls out a window, falls 3 stories, dies. Paul goes outside and brings him back to life. There's a story where Paul's sitting around a fire and a snake attaches to his arm, a poisonous snake. He just shakes it off into the fire and keeps warm in his hands. He's not worried about it. So in my mind, that's thinking Paul understood that there was a divine power at work in his life. And we can imagine that if we're also joined to Christ, just as Paul was joined to Christ, then we have access to that power as well. But here's the problem. The problem is when we approach these kinds of scriptures, we approach God and our relationship with God in a way that we're thinking can give us some kind of control, give us some kind of power. The same way people might consult horoscopes, even pull out their magic 8-ball or like a Ouija board, whatever it is, we're consulting powers outside of ourselves in order to gain some level of control in our lives, gain some level of power in our lives. Then we're misusing the scriptures. And I think sometimes we use verses like that in order to satisfy that need to feel secure, to feel safe. I think people might wear a cross around their neck because they want to show other people that they belong to Christ, to remind themselves that they belong to Christ. But others might wear it as kind of a magic charm to protect them so that they won't get in a car accident. Stick a fish on your bumper and then, your car is safe. So there's this idea that we can approach one verse from 2 different perspectives. Imagine signing up for the army because you think, if I can just join the army, I'm going to get free camo, I'm going to get this awesome weapon. They're going to train me to use it. I'm going to have the best insurance in the country. Every time I'm at the airport, I get to get on first. Why should I not join the military? It's a bonus. It's perfect. So you join the military, and all of a sudden you're recruited to boot camp. All of a sudden you're expected to defend the country and maybe go to war. I didn't sign up for this. This idea that the relationship with God goes one way. He's my loving Father. He's going to give me all these things. I can quote these verses, and he's going to support me in every way. That's the wrong mentality. That's not what happens when we join with Christ. Think about Paul. Paul had set his own plans for the future aside and embraced the mission of Christ. He was out there serving Christ 100%, putting his life on the line. Of course, Christ will support him with his power, with his strength. But if we think just because I'm a Christian, God's going to give me his power and I can just use it for my own means, just to support me in my own life, then we're misunderstanding this concept completely. We don't know this verse at all. Ephesians 2:10 says this, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." In other words, there is a mission, there's a job. Jesus called it a harvest, right? A work. He will give us what we need to get through that service. Just like an army will provide a uniform, a weapon, training to a soldier in order to strengthen its force to protect the country, but not so much so that that person can go home and defend their families with a free gun. That's what I want to encourage you with today, is just this mentality, the approach to these verses. Verses like we were looking at last week that said, God will never give me more than I can handle. And then this verse, I can do all things through Jesus. If we're just thinking in terms of what we can get for ourselves, then we might get confused and frustrated why God isn't being more active in our lives. But if we engage more with His life, His mission, working for Him, we might be surprised at how we start to hear from Him, how we start to see His power in our lives and His activity in our lives, the more and more we yield ourselves to that aspect of the relationship. I hope you're continuing on with us. If you have verses that you're curious about and you want me to cover, be sure to write those below. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and do it, and I'll see you next time.